I looked again at the letters O and V. They seemed sad in the second line and seemed satisfactorily happy in line 57. It was just as I had remembered. You seemed happy when you said goodbye. Your letter, now torn in pieces, one piece for each of the years I'd kept it close to my heart, floats now on the black swollen river below me, its pieces floating downriver like seed corn to the waiting fertile soil of Planter's Bar. Who knows what from the seeds of a Dear John letter grows, but in that one simple act, I regained my heart. Perhaps someday something new there will grow.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
The funny part is that I was in a poetry group and these people would write a poem every now and then. I was writing 10 a week or so. And after I read it, he goes, I didn't know you were from Illinois. So that's the point. This has nothing to do with me. It's a set of facts, put some emotion in it, but it's not me. And that's the beauty of writing poetry. You no longer have to stay in your self-contained. You can try on the sleeves of other people's garments.
People, yeah.
From Dallas, Texas, this is Spool, hosted by Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
Hi, Robert.
Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us here today. We're really thrilled to have you. I'm a man whose life reads like a novel, and that's probably no coincidence because you wrote a few, in particular crime stories, 35 of them. Robert Sadler has been a Dallas police officer, a private investigator, poet, an artist, storyteller who turned real-world experiences into art. From tracking one of the city's most famous, notorious criminals to writing more than 4,000 poems. Crime and creativity in lots of ways are these two really intertwining forces in your life, having resulted in 35 volumes of fictional crime and true crime stories, in 8 volumes of poems, all in all over 4,000 poems.
Correct. Yeah.
As well as photography.
Correct. Yeah.
So if I say, okay, what is the common thread to all of them? One could say crime, the other one would be creativity. The third one is observation, right?
True.
Do you want to go with observation for a moment?
Well, the baseline for all of it was typing.
That's true. You got me there. Without typing, not much would have happened unless...
My student counselor in senior year found that I had an extra hour and I wanted to go home, and I had the choice of PE or study hall or typing.
Ah, okay.
And so I took typing, and that has saved my life many more times than I count them.
But it's funny, I remember this. So my mother, started out working when she was 14, and she was a typist, and so she really learned how to type. And so when I was a teenager, she also said you needed to learn how to type.
If they had married typing with spelling, I'd been better off.
Yeah, no, that's...
I didn't have my own typewriter. That was a graduation present with a typewriter. But
you had one of those little ones that crime investigative journalists have, like you
my mother
traveled
did.
in style with this?
I still got one of those huge old typewriters, but I was handwriting for the longest time, of course, and that's where I started writing poems in high school. It was just handwritten.
When did you write your first book?
First manuscript was like 2006. I'd been writing poetry basically full time. For me, it was full time, but I was doing other work.
I mean, just look around. I can ask anyone here, have you written any poems lately? Most would probably say no, right? So why, writing over 4,000 poems, there's a desire to express oneself and kind of find oneself.
I wanted to be a fine artist. Okay. That was really my best subject in school was art. When I went to college, I was going to be a fine art major. Come to find out, what I really wanted to do was paint. I didn't want to do all the other stuff.
Right. So where did you go to college?
Oklahoma State.
All right.
And I left before.
Okay.
My frustration got in touch with with the rest of me.
Okay.
And I left, came back to Dallas, joined the Dallas Police Department. I didn't want to be a starving artist.
Okay, fair enough.
So I thought I needed to have a day job or a job, working evenings to deep nights. So during the day when everybody else was at work, I could be painting.
This was a way of being bold.
Yes.
Your career, in the Dallas Police in the 60s and 70s resulted in you eventually becoming a crime analyst, right?
Yes.
So this would have, in my mind, what do I know about crime and police? But it's a very analytical side that requires a lot of observation, right?
Right.
And I somehow, in my mind, associate that with the gift of writing.
To a degree.
Does that link up, or am I just making this up here?
I think you mentioned earlier about the creativity aspect. In solving crimes or looking at crimes, you have to look at it creatively. You can't you can go by the book, but you've got to do lots of other things.
Well, it's a puzzle of sorts, I would imagine, right?
Yes.
And unfortunately, not always a complete puzzle.
Right.
You just have some pieces that you have to put together to see the whole, right?
There's always a constant narrative going on because you've got facts coming in. You're trying to analyze those facts. Crime analysts back then, I would simply sit down and read through all of the offense reports that had happened in the previous 24 hours for things like theft, burglary, rape, murder, and I would start combining that knowledge in my head with the facts, etc., and help to direct, hopefully, officers in specific areas.
But so if I kind of try to boil it down, it's like the kind of ability to observe, to analyze, but then ultimately what you're telling me, even as a crime analyst, is the ability to tell the story, because without a story, you don't find a coherent pattern in any of it.
Right.
Would that be right?
Yes.
The Friendly Burglar Rapist came out in 2012, so a little bit thereafter, right?
Well, I had written 3 books, manuscript books, and at that time I said to my partner, Tom Covington, it's time to write the story, because I in my mind, when I found who this burglar was committing these series of rapes, there's a story there. There's a long-term story there. So I kept my notes, Tom kept his notes, and so when it came time, we started putting everything together, and I wrote the book.
So that's also what you call a true crime.
Yes.
So very much a documentary history of sorts, based on your observation, on your note files, and so on. And so forth.
I had each of the crime reports from the officers that had gone out and actually taken the information from the victim, and then we followed up from there.
Some of us may know or have heard of that case as being one of the most notorious crime cases in Dallas history, but it was one of the most brutal ones, but also a very perplexing one, because there was this mismatch between the crime scenes and then the eventual perpetrator, right? Can you just remind us again? I mean, you will know what the case is about, because not everyone will know.
He was a middle-aged. He wasn't quite 30 when we caught him. He was an ad executive for a famous company downtown. He was a runner, was an athlete, and he would go out and jog through different parts of town almost every night. And he would go into. We asked him, how many did you go into a night? He said, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And multiple times. And he would go in, find the woman's purse, go through it, get her driver's license, decide whether this was somebody he wanted to spend time with or not. And he was called the Friendly Burglar Rapist because he told people, well, you've just caught a burglar in the act. And he would put a pillowcase over the woman's head and bind her.
Never caught. It went on for quite a while, right?
3 years.
Yeah.
There was a tendency over time that he was getting toward that moment where if he had been cornered, in my mind, he very well have struck out. And
you were working in this case. You were trying to chase this individual. You wrote all these notes. Presumably you had quite a bit to do with the victims as well and their respective families. Revisiting all of this and writing that, I mean, would have occupied you again with this for quite some time. Was that difficult?
Try to separate the emotion of and the horror that you have to deal with, that the victim has to deal with, that never goes out of your mind. One of the reasons why you're doing what you're doing is to bring them some kind of justice, some kind of reason to what happened. So it wasn't really difficult to go beyond, because I was taking the simple facts and in a chronological order, writing the story.
So this is a true crime one,
Yes.
but then you're famous really for the others as well. You've written 35 novels in your Michael Grant series. What keeps you coming back to that detective, and how much of you is now in that quote-unquote fictional Michael Grant in there?
Very little of me.
Okay.
I certainly have understanding of a number of things that happened, and I did pick the name Michael Grant for several different reasons, and I also had an idea of what was going on, and I did use one of my first cases as a private investigator. The first book only came about because I wrote a poem. A long line poem. It turned out to be about 560 words, something like that.
Okay.
And I thought there was a story in the poem that needed to be told. There was more to the story than I was telling in the poem.
That, you're almost leading me into my next question, because I was wondering, well, is there the relationship between your poetry and your fiction or nonfiction? Is there a relationship, or are they entirely two different?
They're two different things, other than the fact that if you were to read the majority of my poetry, it's not about me.
Right.
I found very early on that there wasn't a lot that needed to be told about me and my emotions. But if you take a set of experiences and you extrapolate how a character might, or you speculate how a character might act, and you give them certain immutable traits, the story begins to tell itself. The best way I can describe it is what those who are proponents like me call writing in the dark.
Okay.
It's, in a sense, a stream of consciousness. You basically have a character and a problem, and the character is going to attack that problem. The character begins to tell me what's going on, and all I'm trying to do is run along beside him like a movie.
Right.
And write down what they say and do.
So in other words, the way you write this is not that you all map it out and then you
Correct.
just execute it, but you are yourself, kind of lost in the mystery that is unfolding, and you're kind
Exactly.
of fascinating.
And I'm constantly surprised at what the characters do. And I don't plan it at all.
Well, that probably suggests why you keep going back, because
true.
in lots of ways it's a kind of moment of revelation for you yourself, right?
Yes.
Fascinating. Why do you think it is that people like crime stories?
I think you mentioned it earlier, something that's about like a jigsaw puzzle. Everybody's trying to solve the puzzle. Everybody really wants to be the one that figures it out. A lot of crime shows give you enough MacGuffins and leads for you to go, oh, it's that person. Or you go, every time I've watched this show, it's never that person. It's not the 12 people they said it could be, and it's somebody else.
On some other level in particular, since we are involved in making sense out of that, also that feeling that the world actually makes sense became clear toward the end, that this was the criminal who committed the crime. So things that overtly seemed perplexing actually do have a deeper meaning and can be deciphered, and that one translates that experience of reading the crime story into thinking about the world as being like that as well.
Well, I think you have to understand that the world is complex, and that you're trying to get to the end.
Right.
One of the poems that I wrote, the ending line is that any poem ends is its own ambiguity. You're always trying to find the story.
Right.
You're trying to find the beginning, the middle, and the end. And some stories don't start at the beginning. The middle is the beginning. Sometimes the end is the beginning, and you just go from there. If you want,
You have something to read for us?
I can read the poem that started the reason why I wrote the
I
novel.
think that would be great. Let's go with that.
It's called Love Letters from the Sky. After you left and the promised phone calls didn't come, I'll check the mailbox 4 or 5 times a day, hoping each day to have some contact with you. Just when the memory of our time together was fading, after 3 lost years of waiting, I decided to give up hope on ever hearing from you. I got the news. You liked mystery. I suspect there were other reasons too. So you never tell me exactly who you were, where you were from. We only shared our first names those 8 days and nights we were under the famous blue Jamaican skies. Anyway, you said you'd call her right. I was ready to fly to Canada, Montreal, Quebec, or wherever to bring you back to Texas as my bride. You said you'd never get over being rejected if I never called you. Even as I left you at the airport, with you insisting I not come in, you still would not give me your address and phone number, while showing me that you still had mine. Anyway, you said you'd call her right. I never knew what flight you took or the airlines you were on. I never knew you had to change planes in Atlanta. I just knew you were off to Canada to tie up loose ends. So the plane crash in Atlanta never caught my eye. Though our separate flights increased the time and space apart, we were closer in the air that day than we would ever be again. After you left and the promised phone calls never came, I still checked the mailbox perhaps 4 or 5 times a day, hoping against hope each day for some contact from you. Just when the memory of our time together was fading and 3 years of waiting was up, I decided to give up hope of ever hearing from you. I received a letter on government letterhead. They were forwarding 8 stamped letters that were addressed to me. The government's letter said you were deceased, having died in a crash on Flight 105. They'd held your effects, a flight bag with 8 letters, and since they'd not found any next of kin, they were disposing of the flight bag and sending me the letters. For days, I kept company with the rain and cried, but on the 5th day, after your letters came, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. On your flight to Montreal, you carried 8 letters. You'd written one for each of the days we'd been together. But before you got to Atlanta, they fell with you from the sky. Now I know I was flying home to Texas the day you died. Your 8 letters were bundled in a hair ribbon I bought for you on the beach in Negril. Untying that bundle, each letter was marked, I love you, and opened me first, second, third, and so on through 8. Now I knew the reason why, and once again I could take pleasure in remembering our 8 days and 7 nights in love. For now I had received your letters, 8 love letters that had fallen from the sky. So after I write that, I'm going, there's got to be a reason for that, how this guy got there, what happened to women, and et cetera.
Right.
So
there was certainly a story in there, right?
yes, so Jamaica Moon was my first book,
All right.
and it all came
From that poem. Wow. That's really powerful, though. I think
Okay.
you happen to bring another one, right?
I have a few, yes.
You have a few. Let's hear one more.
I mentioned this one earlier about how the poems end. This one's called La Poesia de Ambiguidad. A poetry is a statement of truth, of lies absurd, emotions, feelings, fantasy, a visual painting in unfettered words. A written sculpture that conveys its own vocabulary into the outstretched arms of someone else's dictionary. So how do we know canvas wet with oil paints, newsprint sticky with printer's ink, or graphite lines and finger paints, whether the artist's arrow was true to his or her aim? Only one way. It's when he or she signs his or her name. P.S. that any poem ends is its own ambiguity.
Yeah. 4,000 poems, blocks, photography, and one margarita, right? Can you tell us something about that margarita?
Well, yes. One of my favorite restaurants is
It's
Desperados.
a good story, right?
Yes.
So,
Desperados in
hear that.
Mexican food here in Dallas. And I've been going there since they opened in 1976. And so it became the mental place where Michael Grant would go to have lunch or dinner and meet friends and have meetings there. So he was enjoying one of their top shelf margaritas, because he's a man that doesn't really have problems with money. He was familiar with a Spanish liqueur called 43. Mm-hmm. It's a famous in the old
Again,
country.
Smiles in the production team here.
And so I had the bartender in the story put in a splash of 43 into the top shelf margarita. So after about the 7th book, I'm going, wait a minute, I've created a new cocktail. This is something that's new. So I went home and worked through the recipe and came up with one and sent it into Bartender Magazine that has a thing where they will copyright, they call it cocktail right, your recipe. I end up writing that in the book that Michael Grant has come up with the recipe, and he's talking to Jake, who's the manager, and Jake says, oh, that's a great idea, we'll put it on the menu. And so in real life, they did put it on the menu.
That's where that
and
story comes from.
They even have a brass plaque in one of the booths that says Michael Grant's booth. And
Oh, they still do?
Yes.
All right. One thing that you also do, we haven't talked about, is so you write poems, you write fiction, you write documentary books, photography.
Well, that was...
Why also on top of it, I mean, you started out as fine art, so you're really covering the whole wide spectrum. What compels you, or why photography?
It's familiarity and immediate process. When I was in college, one of the classes I could take was in photography. So I took photography class, learned how to take pictures, and the fact that you could get multiple pictures out of one frame,
Right.
and knew the darkroom procedures and all like that. And
That's changed a little bit.
Absolutely. At least back then, in order to really be creative with the photography, you had to be in the dark room
Yeah,
as
you had
well.
to know the
Yeah. I appreciate beauty and things that attract me. And so when I'm not able to write, and I have forestalled giving much time for painting because I don't have the hand for it that I did when I was younger. And it's easier to describe something, get an emotion out or whatever, either on paper or in a book, or in a photograph. So I'm constantly taking pictures. Generally, I will start with a picture that begins a book for me. Like I had a beautiful picture in a field where this beautiful sunset with what's called buttermilk sky. Okay, so I end up writing a book called Buttermilk Sky, and it's a murder mystery, whatever you want to call it. So.
Wonderful. Chase you now around with your poems, your books, and so on and so forth. But if we roll back, was it all predestined when your father met Alfred Hitchcock that you were meant to become a writer of mysteries and thrillers?
I don't know. My dad was a writer, wrote mostly for TV, and
This was in 1952 that your
Yes.
father met actually Alfred Hitchcock here in
Yes.
Dallas, right?
yeah, he was in town to promote a movie with the stars of the movie, and they came on this set for one of the I think called Midday Merry-Go-Round or
Right,
something like
right.
that.
Mystery, no less.
Yeah,
You know?
and the gag was that Hitchcock is always doing a little walk-on
Right.
at the beginning of his picture, and so my dad said, "Hey, wouldn't it be funny if I walked in, because he's up in the control room, if I walked in and got in the middle of the set,
Right.
which wasn't what he usually did, and I'd ask Hitch for a light."
A hitch.
Okay, so Mr. Hitchcock then asks somebody, said, "I need a candle." So the prop guy goes and gets a candle. He lights the candle and puts it down beside him, and nobody says anything, and he doesn't say what it's for. So they're doing their little interview, and my dad walks into the scene and leans over to Hitch with a cigarette and says, "Could you give me a light?" Hitch reaches over and grabs the candle.
Ah,
Okay, and there's the old joke about so-and-so couldn't hold a candle to me
Right,
or whatever.
right, yeah.
So Hitch says, "Don't let anybody tell you I can't hold a candle to Bill Sadler." So
that's a good. And so when did you learn about that story?
I guess I knew about it from the time I was 10 or 12, something
So
like
in
that.
other words, that could be our evidence that in lots of ways may have early on inspired you to become the writer that you eventually became.
I suppose. I think
Makes for a good story,
yes.
doesn't it?
I think my first and second grade teacher happened to be the same woman. Usually wrote on my report cards, that I was such a nice boy, but I spent a lot of time looking out the windows, daydreaming. And I think that's really the genesis of my storytelling.
This is where it all came from. Well, thank you for looking out of the window over these years and writing all these great stories and for being here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
My name is Dr. Nils Roemer. I'm the Dean of the Bass School. Thanks to my guest, Robert Sadler, for being here and for you watching our show.